kind of thing that we mourn tonight, and our prayers go out, obviously, to all of the families, and we sense that as we report this story that is just so highly sensitive. Security has been a key word here today. What's going to happen? What's happening now? And Todd McDermott has been looking into the security issues and a few other things. Todd, bring us up to date.
Ernie, Angela, we want to start with telling you more about what the U.S. Navy and Air Force are doing to secure this country. As you know, all civilian air traffic has been shut down nationwide. Will be shut down until at least noon tomorrow. While that is going on, military aircraft are transporting people to this area to help in the relief and rescue and recovery efforts. At the same time, the Navy has dispatched 2 sets of aircraft carriers along with the ships that go along with them to New York and Washington after today's attack. President Bush vows to find all responsible. In the meantime, Admiral Robert J. Natter, the commander of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, has sent the ships to help with defense and medical needs, saying we haven't been attacked like this since Pearl Harbor. Those ships include the carriers, the USS John F. Kennedy and Norfolk-based USS George Washington, both of which were headed to New York. An Atlantic Fleet spokesman says each has a crew of up to 3,000 sailors, and the JFK's Air Wing has about 1,500 sailors and airmen. Again, part of the security measure will be aircraft will be on the decks of those carriers and armed to maintain security along the East Coast, especially right here in New York and down towards Washington. Also deployed, amphibious ships, guided missile cruisers, guided missile destroyers capable of responding to threats from the air and the sea are being deployed to protect our coast. Those amphibious ships are carrying Marines and sailors to provide security, surgical teams as well for the medical needs of those injured, and limited hospital bed facilities. Also, the nation's military, as you might imagine, as we've been reporting for hours, is on the highest state of alert right now as the president vows to hunt down those responsible for the attacks. The president, as you know, was in Florida this morning, then taken to a military base, Barksdale, I believe, in Louisiana, before heading to Offutt Air Force Base and Strategic Air Command in Nebraska. The naval installations under the command of Natter, the Atlantic Fleet, are also on the highest security condition. That's 188 ships, more than 1,200 aircraft, 37 shore stations, more than 125 sailors, Marines, and civilian employees. Navy officials are not giving details about security measures in great detail again, but Atlantic Fleet spokesman Mark McDonald says some measures include banning anyone but essential personnel at the naval base, which is the world's largest. Around the country, fighters, airborne radar, refueling planes have been scrambled, according to the Air National Guard. The North American Aerospace Defense Command also on high alert tonight. The U.S. portion of the St. Lawrence Seaway also closed. That's a spokesman for the Army Corps of Engineers relaying that information to us. Again, high state of alert throughout the country right now. As we say that, we've been talking about most of the country being shut down. That is the case. Amtrak has canceled all Northeastern Corridor service. Greyhound buses will not run tomorrow. We talked about the NFL. National Football League will consider and announce within the next 24 to 48 hours its decision on games this weekend, along with the Emmy Awards this weekend being canceled. You know about the New York primary being postponed. Major League Baseball was canceled tonight, may be canceled into tomorrow. That's the first time in more than 55 years that has happened. The NCAA considering canceling football games, rock concerts across the country being canceled as well. More of this coming in, but essentially this country is in a different kind of mode now. All non-essential things are being shut down. An estimated 1.6 million Americans fly every day in this country. None, again, will fly tomorrow, at least until noontime. Angela, Ernie?
Thank you, Todd. And, of course, just to remind you, to repeat, there will be a news conference scheduled tonight at around 9:30 in a short time from now by the Port Authority. We certainly will get an update on the information that Todd was just telling us about. Angela?
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, Ernie. I think it's time, I think a lot of us would agree, it's time to call on a higher power to get us through this. A lot of people have done that this evening. They've been at prayer services, certainly at St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is where Pablo Guzman is standing by live with more for us. Pablo.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because about 8 minutes ago, and pardon me if I keep looking over my shoulder, about 8 minutes ago, Governor Pataki made a surprise, unexpected appearance here at St. Patrick's with his now expanded security detail, and if we can get his attention as he comes out, he didn't want any cameras in there with him. This is a private moment for him, but perhaps when he comes out, maybe we can talk with him for just a bit. I've been talking with investigators who have been handling various aspects of this case. case as they have had in the past, the Oklahoma City bombing and the first World Trade Center bombing. And for those investigators who are dealing with the apparent breach in airport security, until they know for sure just how those teams were able to bring weapons on board, one of the things that they're looking at is perhaps the assistance of ground crew personnel or baggage handlers. It may be that none of them had anything to do with this, but for right now, I'm told that the FBI is either beginning to grill or will be grilling baggage handlers, ground crews, and the like to see if anybody assisted in any way in getting anything on board for those teams to do what we now know that they did. Here at St. Patrick's at 5:30, the Cardinal himself presided over a service, and afterwards he talked with reporters. He said that he had been at St. Vincent's, where you have heard one of our reporters today all day, and a reporter asked him, did you give the last rites? And without flinching, he looked at that reporter and said several times. In fact, I did to one man who just minutes later died, and still, without blinking, without flinching, the Cardinal said, it seemed to me that that man knew that he was on his way to meet God, and in his way, he was at peace. Many people from the Archdiocese, many of the people involved in rescue have lost people. Police officers have come by to talk about their comrades who are missing or who are presumed dead. Same with firefighters. And of course, there's just all the regular innocent folks that go about their daily work, that go about trying to figure out how am I going to pay the rent, how do I take care of my kids' dental bills, who got everything snuffed out in this blast, in this flame, in this explosion. Again, it's going to be a while before we all digest that, even when we see some of the images that we've been seeing, to digest just what it is. But we're going to hear stories of countless people. We're going to hear stories that are going to help us put faces and lives and emotions, people just like us, that could have been us, as my mother would say, there but for the grace of God. Here at St. Patrick's, that could have been any one of us. It will be a while before we internalize the enormity of what's happened here. And at the same time, there's a great deal of anger as well. As I said, Governor Pataki is inside. I asked one of his aides why he came by here. He said he wanted to take a moment to stop and pray. If we have the time, we'll talk to him when he comes out. Back to you.
Pablo, we had Dr. Larry Balter on with us a little earlier talking about this, the impact on young people, on children especially, and how parents deal with this. I'm just wondering, and you sort of touched on this, some of the people that you have talked to, have they talked to you about their attitude about life in this city, themselves, their families, and what they feel right now?
We take a lot for granted. You know, until something like this happens, you don't really know how precious it is what we have. You know, I've found as I've gotten older as a reporter, when I was a younger reporter, I'd do a story like this and just look for the facts, just try to get to meet my deadline, try to find out what the hook was, get to the story, and sometimes brush right past the things now that make me cry. And it's hard for me sometimes to come on and talk about these things with people without breaking down, because you want to be an objective vessel. You want to be able to tell that story just factually without getting in the way. Right. But it's hard, because as you talk to the people who have lost people or who have people close to them who are hurt, you get moved by that.
Right. Yeah. It's difficult. Thank you, Pablo. It's so right, because here we are.
The governor and the Cardinal, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay,
sure, go right to it.
Coming out together, but you know, they move at their own pace.
Oh, certainly.
So you might as well talk, and as we see them, then we'll try to pick them up.
Yeah, Pablo, we were just saying that, you know, and we know you're a family man, and what we're thinking about here is, you know, the impact that it has on all of us. Yes, we do our job as reporters, as correspondents, but at the same time, it's very difficult, and I think the people listening to us understand, to separate yourself from the human family.
Certainly.
And the emotions that are involved and your own personal feelings about yourself and your loved ones. So it's a very difficult thing, and we do understand what you're talking about there, and I wouldn't be embarrassed about saying that either, Pablo.
My wife told me that she had to explain to our daughter, who's 9, about to be 10, what happened without trying to scare her.
I was going to ask you about that, because I know you have small children, and I was wondering how you or your wife, you know, were going to handle that. But you've been at work all day.
I hope that, and that's also made my daughter nervous, because she thinks I'm right down there. The governor is coming over, Governor Pataki. I'm sorry to bother you right now. I know that you took a private moment to be with the Cardinal and a spiritual moment, actually. Am I right in that assumption?
Yes, it's important to say a few prayers. All New Yorkers should be praying for the people who will not come home, the children who won't have their father come home, the mothers who might not have a child come home. Prayer is an important part right now.
Governor, I don't know if the audience can see what I see, but I see the tears in your eyes. A lot of times, I hate to say this, we listen to politicians, and it seems to be, oh, it's some pre-programmed thing, it's kind of plastic. You didn't have to come here, you didn't have to make this stop, and you didn't have to take the time to tell people what it is that you're feeling right now.
It's just very hard, but it's as hard for everyone else, and for some it's harder who have loved ones who are missing. I know people who are missing, and I'm very concerned, but what we have to do is show that compassion, but also provide the leadership to make sure that we do everything in our power to continue the rescue efforts, to continue the assistance efforts, and we're going to get through this. New Yorkers have come together. This is one of the darkest days in American history, but we're going to get beyond this, and we're going to come back stronger as a city, as a state, and as a country.
One final question. I know it's a tough balancing act. Compassion on the one side. You've been in touch with President Bush. I also know that there are people who want to see something done in the name of justice. That's tough, balancing those two things.
I'm confident that the President and the administration will take the appropriate response to make sure that we are as safe as we can possibly be. And the American people will stand with them when they take that harsh action. You know, it's been said before, but the last time this happened, Pearl Harbor, the response was that the forces of evil had leashed a sleeping dragon. And I think they've done it now. The American people are strong, the American country is strong, and we will be united in our efforts against terrorism here and around the world.
I know you're busy. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My best to you and your family and those that you know who suffered a loss. I'm very sorry.
My daughter.
I saw her before.
Yeah,
hi.
my daughter.
You came with your dad. How are you doing? You okay? I mean, you get swept up in this. This is not like a campaign stop or something like that.
No, I'm doing all right. Right now, I know of 2 people who did not survive.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. But I've been with my father for the greater half of the day. It's been nice for us to have each other tonight.
Please pass on to the families of those people that we feel for them. I'm very sorry. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Always. Good to see you. Like I said, it's rough talking to people under those circumstances, and it's rough to do what it is that we have to do and just convey the news, step out of the way. But we are not made out of plastic either. Back to you.
Not, Pablo, and I think a lot of people, you know, expect us to... It's hard. It's really hard. No. I know I have cried at a private moment, and I know you have too, and I can see Pablo has as well. This is overwhelming.
We listened to the governor tonight, you know, share his innermost thoughts, and he was talking about the deep concern that he has for the people that he knows that are missing today. And it makes us think about all of those who are now unaccounted for. Yes. We have given some figures that there were approximately 10,000 people in those 2 towers today, yes, as well as the hundreds of people on the ground and nearby buildings, including 2 Marriott airports nearby the center. Vince Dementri was telling us earlier tonight about how fire officials want to get in there and do their job and get to those people who hopefully need some help.
But they can't.
They can't for a number of reasons, of course, because those fires are still not under control. There are some structural problems as well, and that's going to take some time. But in the meantime, you know, we do think about what's going on the job at hand. So far, at least 2,000 people, just to update you, have been reportedly injured. 5 dead. That number, of course, could change. About 800 people in the hospital. Many of them are in critical condition tonight.
Let's go down to Marcia Kramer. She, too, has been traveling along with the mayor today. Marcia, give us an update.
Well, actually, it's an interesting update. I've just received a call from Jamal Reyes. He's with the Arab Americans for Peace. And interestingly enough, he's issuing a condemnation of the attack on the American people today. He's apologizing to fellow Americans for the attack, but he also wants to call on members of the media and also to law enforcement officials not to jump to any conclusions as to who the perpetrators are until a full investigation has taken place. And most importantly, he says he wants to make sure that the American Muslim community is not does not undergo any harassment either by law enforcement officials or by members of the community for terrorist acts that may have been perpetrated by people who have nothing to do with this country. Again, Arab American Group for Peace condemning the attack on American soil, but saying, don't take it out on us. Reporting live from Lower Manhattan, I'm Marcia Kramer, CBS 2.
Marcia, thank you for that update. And Vince Dementri is in Lower Manhattan now. Of course, Vince, at building number 7, some 30, 45 minutes before it actually collapsed. Thank God he moved. Vince, what is happening now in Lower Manhattan?
Vince Dementri standing by.